one of the things we do is gathering evidence. And so this is one of the ways we gather evidence that we do some sampling. And this is probably something we're a little more familiar with, or at least, maybe makes a little bit more sense, I guess, than kind of the theoretical stuff with auditing. Okay, so basically we have a bunch of accounts receivable, and we have to pick a sample. There's a random number table, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And we're going to pick 5 items. First 2 columns in the 5 items in the accounts receivable. Okay. Here's the wacky thing about, or one of the wacky things about auditing, that everything you do in auditing must be repeatable by somebody else, a reviewer, and get the same results. So it must be repeatable with the same, and by someone else and get the same results. Now the judgment might be different. How you interpret what you get might be different. Maybe if 3% of the items have errors, someone might say that's good, someone might say that's bad. That's judgment, but everyone should come up with the same 3%. So that's what we're talking about here. So you have to always document exactly how you did it, what you did, so that someone else can come in and do exactly the same thing and get the same results. And the problem with, for instance, when we go through this, so we're going to pick a sample, a random sample. The problem is, how do you pick a random sample and someone else comes by and picks a different random sample? You're not going to get the same results, even though you both pick random samples. And from your statistics class, you guys probably have already had statistics. If you haven't, generally you want a random sample. Random samples are usually the best. They represent the entire population the best if it's random. If they're not free from bias, not biased. So anyway, a random number table, though, is one of the ways you can do it. There are other ways too. But what we're going to do is we're going to have this random number table, and we're going to use it to first choose which ones we're going to test. And then we're going to test and kind of, make a little bit of a, figure out where we're at. Basically, if we were doing an audit, how much will we trust these accounts and the balances and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so getting back to this thing. Okay, so there are 30 accounts here. And we go down to this random number table, and this is really what they call it. It could be a random number table, it could also be a random digits table. If we were to try to use the account numbers to match them up, it would be really difficult. It'd be searching all day through these, to find numbers that match up to these numbers. So what you sometimes have to do, and that's what I did here, is say, okay, well, we'll renumber them ourselves and then pick the sample. So sometimes it's important to, they call them, massage the data, get the data into some format that you can actually use. So renumbering is not that uncommon of a thing. And a lot of times, if you're using computer systems, there'll be record numbers there anyways. So you can just use those. But anyway, so I'm not going to try to match these up. It would be impossible. So, but these over here, if I renumber it, I can do it. Okay, so this random number table. Now, this random number table it's really what they call random digits. Each one of these is completely random. Okay. So anyway, saying that, you could pick from this column, or this column, or whatever column you want. Now we have 2 digits here. So we're going to pick 2 digits. So this one is, it says we're going to use the first 2 columns. Okay, so these are the first 2 columns, and we are going to try to find numbers 1 through 30. We're going to find the first 5 that we come across, 1 through 30, using this random number table. So is there a number 3 that we can pick? Yes, there is. Here's number 3. So we're going to pick number 3 as our first item. Is there a number 46? No, it only goes up to 30. So there's no 46. There's no 51. There's no 32. There is an 11. There is a 14. There is an 18. There's not a 91. There is a 28. And we got 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so notice what we did. It's a random number table, so we picked a random sample. Why? Because it's the best. It's the best indicator of what the population of a whole is going to look like, is it's not biased. But notice that by saying that we use the first 2 columns, everybody using the first 2 columns will pick the same 5 items. So it's a random sample, but everyone's going to pick the same random sample. So if your supervisor comes through and says, okay, I'm going to check your work, they can go through and okay, the sample you picked is that when I pick the sample, it'll be the same as one you picked, and so on and so forth. And by the way, your work as an auditor oftentimes gets checked for different people, 5 different people maybe. It'll get checked by, we'll talk about later, but the senior, the manager, the partner, maybe a reviewer will look at it. There might even be a reviewing partner. So a lot of people look at these, and they should all be able to, come up with the same thing that you did. Again, the judgment might be different, but whatever the results are of the test, they should all be the same, and that's why one reason why they do it this way. Okay, so a random number table, we picked 5 items. And so I'm going to just copy them down here just to get them a little bit closer. Hope this works. Hey, I think it does. Oops, that shouldn't be there. Okay, so that is a random sample. I know it's probably the first time you guys seen this, but is there anything on this that, any questions you have so far? So far we just picked the sample. We haven't done any testing of it yet. Okay, so the book amount, those are the amounts that the client claims that those accounts receivable are worth. And we would call it some management assertions, which we'll get to later. But the management, when they give you a document like this, it's assumed that these are all correct, that they believe that these are all the right amounts for these accounts. So what we have to do is go into each of these items from our sample, and as auditors, we'll go through and check the information in the background. So I got a little dog that runs around like a maniac, and she just crashed into something upstairs. But anyway, so we'll get the documentation information. There's a number of things we'll look at. We could look at the invoices, the bill of ladings, to make sure they've been shipped and all kinds of stuff. We're not going to worry about that right now. But what we do is we check and we say, okay, if you say that this accounts receivable is worth $5,000, let's go in and see what this thing is really worth. Yeah, it might be worth $5,000. It might be worth something else. But we have, as auditors, we have to go in and see what the actual amount is that these people owe you. For one thing, you could be just making up, accounts receivable and putting it on the books to make the company look better. Okay. The little dog just crashed, and then I think sometimes she crashes and then just lays down and goes to sleep. Okay. All right. So we go to the first one. And the first one, it looks okay. The book amount was 81.83. The audit amount is that. So the first one is okay. We go to the second one. And the second one, it's okay. Go to the third one. Third one is not okay. Oops. Hold on a second. Let me get that clear. So I notice the third one here is, they say it's 7607. We look at it, we say it's 7207. So we get a little bit of a discrepancy there. Go to 18, and we come up that it is off by $1,000. So this one is off too. Also, the last one looks okay. Okay. So we've taken our sample now. And now we're going to try to make some sense out of it. So we've taken the sample. We're going to now, this same sample, whoever else comes through will take the same sample, blah, blah, blah. Now we have to see, okay, what is this, what are these accounts receivable really worth? And we have to figure out, how are we going to take this sample and project it over the population as a whole, which is kind of what sampling does. And this isn't just for auditing, for any kind of sampling. They take a sample, the vaccines, for instance, they take the sample of the vaccines and they test on a small number of people and see how it works. If it works, they go further and maybe do more tests and all that. If it doesn't work, they say, okay, forget about it. We're going to try something else. So, but you take a small sample, and when you're talking about things like medicine, you can't just there's 7 billion people on the planet. There's no way you can test on everybody. So you take a sample of people and then you project it over the entire population. Okay, if this works with 60% of the people, we project it, 60% of people of the entire population will work. Whatever it is, you take a smaller sample and you project it over a larger one. It could be anything. It could be how much How much do the ducks on the pond weigh? You go pick up some ducks and you weigh them, and okay, we now know about how much the entire population of these ducks, all that kind of stuff. So it could be anything. In this case, it's accounts receivable. So what we're going to try to do is get an average here for each of these. So we have the average for the book. Let me do something first. Let's get a total, and then we'll do the average. Oops. Okay, so the total for book is I do my document camera. Okay, 8183 plus 7982. 7607. 6. 33,795. You may want to check that. Okay, so for that one. For this one would be $32,395. Is that what you guys got?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and so we're going to divide it by the number of items. All right, which is 5. And this will give us our averages. So this is 5. So this will be our average. $64.79. $67.59. Okay. So this would be our book average. And this will be our audit average. By the way, just think about this just kind of in general. Which number is more convincing? The book value that the client came up with, or the audit value? As an auditor, which one of those is the most convincing? The work that was handed to you, or the work that you did?
The work you did.
Yeah, the audit. The audit, so information that you get yourself is more convincing than information someone else gives you. Just because you know the source of it, you know how it came about and that sort of thing. So whenever you're doing an audit, the stuff that you obtain yourself is always more convincing than the stuff you get secondhand, like the book values here. They came from the client. Okay, so these are the averages. So lazy and copy those. The book average is that. Average is this. And again, this number we're a little bit, well, not a little bit. We're definitely more. It's more convincing. It's better evidence. Simply because it came from us and not secondhand from somebody else. Okay, now the question becomes, how do we take these numbers that we have and spread them over this entire population? There are 30 accounts here. And we have to say, okay, we're taking the sample and now we're going to project this over the entire 30 items in the sample, see what we think that the true value of the sample is. And we're going to start on the next page here. And I'm going to copy these down to the next page just because we're going to need them. Okay. Using the audit average and the book average from the previous page, calculate projected values using the 3 classical sampling methods. And this is called classical sampling. The total book value of the accounts is $200. Okay, so I just made this one up. So I ran out of space here, but if you were to add all these up, all these book amounts, if you were to add all those up, they come out to 200,000. So here, as auditors, we're looking at this 200,000, saying, well, is this something that we can, is this number, is it close to that? If it's close, remember we look for things that are material, we're probably fine with it. But if it's not close, then we might suggest that they make some changes to the number. Okay, so coming down here, so this is how we actually do this for the mean per unit estimation. There's 3 different methods. So we'll talk about mean per unit. Just to jump ahead here. Ratio estimation. The following page will have difference estimation. And these are the 3 methods. These get tested occasionally on the CPA exam. They don't hit them tremendously hard, but they do hit them sometimes. I mean, they'll definitely throw questions out there about them. They might give you a big problem, but usually this kind of stuff is tested in the multiple choice questions, which are worth 1 or 2 points depending on how hard they are. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the audit average. So in this case, 64.79. And we're going to say, okay, well, we came up that the audit average is 64.79. And we're thinking that everything in that population should be the same as our audit average. So everything in that population should be 64.79. And there are 30 things in that population, right? This is the total amount of items in that population. So we're saying that all 30 of these should be worth what we came up with. So that's kind of, this is the mean per unit estimation. So there's 30 And this will give us the projected value, what we think that the entire thing is worth. Let's see here. So it's 9. Let me divide times 30. 194, 370. So this is our projected value. Oops. So the projected value is 194. So this is what we think that the is the best estimate of as far as what we think that they're the true value of these accounts receivable are. So coming down here, they have a book value of 200,000. Oops. Our projected value is 194, 370. So how much is the misstatement? What is it? 5,000. 5,630. So this would be the projected misstatement. So the client says it's worth 200,000. We did our work. We think that it's more, according to this method anyways, it's closer to 194,000. And the difference is 5,000, whatever, a little more than 5,000, 5.5. So this is the misstatement. Are their books overstated or understated? According to what we did. Do they have more on the books than they're supposed to, or do they have less on the books than they're supposed to?
They have more.
All right, it's overstated, yep. So these would be overstated. They're overstated by 5,630. They have 200,000 on the books. We say it should only be 194. Now, the question is, well, is that material or not? It really depends. Yeah, depends on the auditor. It's a judgment call. One of the things about the CPA exam, just to jump back to that for a second, is that they generally don't put a judgment. They don't ask you to make a judgment unless it's something ridiculously obvious. They don't ask you to make a judgment about whether $5,630 is material or not. They're not going to ask you that, but they will ask you what would be the projected misstatement, what would be the projected value, that sort of thing. They'll definitely ask you that. Okay, and again, doing an audit, when you come up with this, someone else should be able to come through doing exactly the same thing, come up with exactly the same misstatement, whether it's material or not is a judgment call. Okay, so this is mean per unit one. Ratio estimation is one that basically says this, that large dollar amount items will have larger errors than smaller dollar amount items. An account that it has $5,000, it wouldn't be that unusual to be off by $200. If there's a $40 account, it probably is not going to be off by $200. Might be off by $2 or something, but it's not going to, the idea is that bigger accounts, bigger errors, smaller accounts, smaller errors. So that's kind of what this ratio estimation is that there's a ratio of what these are off by. And you always take the audit over booked. If you forget which comes first, do it alphabetically. Audit over book. Okay, so let's see. The audit amount is this. And the book amount is, oops. That. And so what the ratio estimation is telling us is that, look, everything in here is off by a ratio. You know, the large things are off by more dollar amounts than smaller things are off by. And so that is what we're doing here. We're getting a ratio of what these are off by. And so this is going to be the audit value divided by the book multiplied by the total book. And that will tell us what this projected value really should be. So the total book was 200,000. Yeah. So 200,000. And that will give us a projected value. Okay, so let's see. Divided by I'm gonna round off the nearest dollar. 191,715. Is that what you guys got?
Yes.
Okay. So that is our projected value. And a projected misstatement will be whatever the difference is between those. $82.85. Okay, so here is the projected misstatement. Ah, oopsie daisy. That's a little bit high. All right. Oops. And overstated, understated. What do you think? Actually, it's the same as before, right? I mean, we think that it's worth less than what they have in the book, so this is overstated. So they have overstated their books by 82.85. And again, is that material or not? It's a judgment call. Now, certainly that one is higher than this other one. So, you know, it depends on the method. And one thing you'll notice about these methods is they don't always come out to be the same. In fact, you know, it's not unusual to have them come out by quite a bit, quite a bit of a difference. And we'll explain what, and later on I'll talk about when we use which one. Okay. So we are just we're trying to get this spread over the population. So ratio estimation, it says everything is that large items will be up by more than small items, which is kind of intuitive, and probably the way most things work. However, the last one here, difference estimation, is that items will be off by the same amount if they're off. And this is something, if, for instance, let's say that it's common, or a common mistake that people make at some companies, that they don't charge the handling fee. I mean, there's a handling fee that's supposed to be charged and they forget about it. So that, you know, if it's a $50 order, they don't charge the handling fee of $5. If it's a $50,000 order, they forget it. So that the amount that is off by is often the same. That's when you use this method, the difference estimation method. And you take the audit average And you subtract the book. So, you know, here's the audit. Here's the book. And we're gonna get a difference here. So 67, whatever that, let me. 64.79. $280. So, in other words, we're saying that each one of these is $280 too high. Right? We should subtract 280 from each one of these items. If there's 30 of them, that each item that has to get $280 subtracted from it. So 30 times 280. 8,400. Now notice this one is a little bit different than the first two because we actually go to the misstatement first. So this is going to be the misstatement. You know, this should be subtracted by 8,400. So the misstatement is 8,400. Oops. It's 8,400 too high. Let me take that negative out. And we're saying that this is overstated. Each one of these items is $280 too high. So if they have 30 of them, it's $8,400 too high. So this is going to be an overstatement of, oops, not that, 8,400. Now it gets tricky though, because we have a book value of 200,000. We have a misstatement of 8,400. And so we have a projected value of what? What would be the projected value? Anyone? So you come up with this, you say that, let's see. Yes, that is absolutely right. 191,600. 191,600 is correct. Yeah, so this one you got to kind of back into it. It's you come up with a projected misstatement first and then back into that one. So this is a different estimation, and this is sort of the opposite of ratio. This says, okay, everything's going to be off by the same amount. Doesn't matter how big the account is. A $50 account or a $50,000 account is going to be off by the same amount. And there are scenarios where that would come into play. But anyway, the idea is though that it really depends on what you're looking at. So what you're actually looking at makes a difference. Okay. All three classical sampling methods will estimate the projected value for the. Hold on a second. Okay, all three classical sampling methods will estimate the projected value. That's actually true. I think I left out the word will estimate the same projected. They will all give you a projected value. Add same in there. The way it was written before, though, is true. It'll give you a projected value, but it won't be the same. And that's false. They're all going to give you. Well, they can. It could be just a coincidence that they don't. but they oftentimes will not. And I would say probably usually, unless you have something strange happen, they would be the same. It could happen. It's not like impossible, but it'd be unusual. Of course, on that. Okay. Let's go ahead and do one more. We'll go into something different. Now, usually, you're taking the CPA exam, they're not going to give you something like this. They're not going to give you a huge, bunch of data that you're not going to use. What they usually do is they'll say, okay, more like this. Even this would be, it would probably be unusual a little bit, but here's the items in our sample that they picked for testing. So there's a total number of them of 1,000, and we picked 10. And these are the numbers. So first thing, now again, this has them all totaled up, so we don't actually have to go pick these. I'm going to add them up. This will be, so there's a sample size of 10. And what is the average audit of, the average audit value of it? Let me get these up closer. So what's the average audit amount and what is the average book value? So what we're going to do is take these and divide it by 10. Okay, so the audit one comes first here. So this is the audit. Okay, so the average audit would be 53.40 divided by 10. Oops, that's not 10. Equals 5,000. Okay, yeah, 5,000. I think this one came out of a CPA exam. Ah. All right, so this would be our average audit amount. And we're going to do the same thing down here for this one. $5,040. Okay. And this, quite honestly, this is probably about as involved as a CPA exam will get. I can't guarantee that. Obviously, they can do whatever they want, but they usually don't go too crazy into actually physically picking the sample and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you're doing auditing, though, you have to know how to do that, but they really don't go too far into it. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for here. Is we're going to split them up. And I'm going to copy these down just to close by. Okay, so why don't I be quiet and see if you guys can figure these out. The mean per unit, the ratio, and also the difference estimation. This is the total amount of the accounts payable. I kind of walked through the first one, yes. The audit amount was this. I have these all. Oh. And so in this 1,000 though, this comes from the previous page. So we have 1,000 of them, and we say that those 1,000 of items should be exactly the same as what we came up with. Okay, now I will be quiet. Okay, I think that's what you should have gotten for these. I need to check my numbers too. I got them wrong. Anyway, the mean per unit, we say the projected value is 5,314,000. You only have 5 million on the book, so would this be overstated or understated? The client's books, would they be overstated or understated? What do you think? Excuse me. They have too much on their books or too little?
It's still understated.
Yeah, it's understated. They should have 5,314,000. They only have 5 million on the book. So, and all these you can see are going to be understated. The ratio one, my calculator only goes up to 6 digits. So if you have 261, that's probably more accurate than what I have. So these are all going to be understated. And then this one down here, of course, is we're saying that each one of these is understated by $174. So you can have add $174 to all 1,000 items. So that every item on there is off by $174. So if you have 1,000 of them, it's off by that. And I think that this is one of the more involved ones. I think this came off of CPA. I'm almost positive it did. By the way, just so you know, a little bit of yeah, the quiz we did last week, that is that we did that last week. Actually, I think it was already done. I think you just have to, I didn't have to send the file back in. I think I accidentally sent you out one that was completed. So yeah, you just have to send the file back in. They're not all going to be that easy, but for that one, yeah, you just send the exact same file that I sent out last week. The what was it called? Beginning of semester information and quiz. Yeah, just send that in. But yeah, so this yeah, I'm almost positive this just a brief history. We'll go ahead and take a break, but the CPA exam used to be an open exam, and what I mean by that is that you could get the questions from it up until 1976, which I know was like before when you guys were born, mostly. But they used to be an open exam. You go in, they'd give you an exam booklet, and then they would give you the answer. The answer booklet we put in. So you have the exam and then the answer booklet. You'd complete the answer booklet, turn that in. You'd have a self-addressed stamped envelope. They'd put the exam in and they would mail it to you. You'd actually get back the exam you took. And you mean they would get the answer thing back. They would keep that for grading. But anyway, so there are actually a lot of actual CPA questions out there for stuff like sampling. Sampling hasn't changed, in the last 25 years or whatever. It hasn't changed. So there's actually quite a few real CPA questions out there for a lot of different things. A lot of the auditing, a lot of the auditing stuff that we do is exactly the same. There's some new stuff, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the actual procedures are the same, and this is one of them. Sampling hasn't changed. So there's quite a few actual sampling questions that are something that you get in a CPA exam. And by the way, one of the things too about back in the day when I took it, a lot of times you did have things like this that you could do these in your head because they didn't allow calculators. You couldn't use calculators on the CPA exam. I know it sounds crazy, but you could use pencils and erasers. That's what they allow you to use. So you did get a lot of these really nice big round numbers, and you knew if you came up with some weird number like 52.37873, you knew they got it wrong. You didn't go back and take a look at it again because they would never give you something like that. They give you these great big nice round numbers. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop, and then I think when we come back, we'll start with the the handout that we started last week.
I have a question.
Sure.
For the difference estimation on the one that we just worked on,
Yeah,
for the projected value, wouldn't that be the 5 million minus the 174,000?
actually, this one's a little bit different in that the audit amount is higher than the book amount. So we're saying that the book amount is 174 too low. So we have to add 174. Let's take a look at, it's an excellent question. Let's go and take a look at the first one and see how it was different. On the first one, man, is that small? On the first one, the audit amount was smaller than the book value. You know, the book value, the audit value was 64, the audit value was 67, right? So it was smaller. So we said, okay, this one is, you know, they're overstating it. Scratch that. Each item is being overstated by 280. You have to subtract it out. Down here, we're saying, okay, you don't have enough on these. You know, look, it should be 5,314. You got an average of 5,140. You're missing this 174,000. So this is $174 each times 1,000. Each item is being understated by that amount. So you have to add it to it. So yeah, it depends on whether the audit amount is higher or lower than the book value. So if it's higher, you have to add it on top, right? It would be added to it. And in this case, we're saying that the average audit amount is 314 compared to their 5,040. And again, remember too that our audit amount carries more weight. You know, it's a better number for us. It's a more persuasive number than what they gave us. We looked into it, and that's what we came up with, was 5,314. That's more persuasive than something somebody gives you secondhand, like the book value. So yeah, it depends on whether the audit amount is higher or lower than the book amount. If it's higher, you got to add it back on. If it's lower, you take it off. And so you kind of look at these. If you look at these, if you just think about just in general, that in this case, we think that there's more compared to what the client has in their books. Yeah. So yeah, it is a little bit strange. And by the way, one of the things too that I'll tell you, then I promise I'll shut up, is that the CPA exam, a lot of times when they do ask the questions, they'll ask whether it's understated or overstated. That is a common question on there. So if the audit amount is higher, it's going to be that they're understated. They're not putting enough on the books. If it's lower, it's going to say, okay, you have too much on the books, you got to take some off. And not to, if you look at this, this is something, this is one of those things that, this is accounts payable. The first one was accounts receivable. Accounts payable, this is when you owe somebody else money. It's more, if a company's trying to make themselves look good, it's more common for them to try to not put all the accounts payable on the books that they should. So, you know, sometimes if they're trying to make themselves look more profitable or something like that, they'll have less of the accounts payable on the books. So understating the accounts payable is a way to make themselves look better. It's a kind of a fraud. Well, I shouldn't say it's fraud. It could just be random, you know, whatever, but it could be. I would say that is something that you would think about if you're committing fraud, saying, well, why don't we reduce the accounts payable? We get a bill in the mail, we hide the bill, don't put it in our system, and, you know, try to underestimate what we have, what we owe to people. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop there. And so let's go to classical sampling. Okay. So again, we're going to do these methods, and it's just kind of you do them a few times, and you kind of get the hang of it. And again, on the CPA exam, they could have regular big problems, and most of these come out of those problems. But they can also have multiple choice questions. A lot of times, they'll give you a scenario. Here's the here's the sample we picked, and come up with a projected value or a projected misstatement, or whatever they want to ask, basically. Okay, so problem number 3. Average audit value. So here's the sample. Okay, let's not do that. So here's the sample, and we got to find the average audit and the average book value. So how do we find the average audit? We're going to divide it by how many items?
5.
Yeah. Did we already do this one? Am I the only one that didn't do it?
Oh.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do the same thing with the $220. Okay. Okay, and then like we did before, we're going to take these values and kind of project them over the entire population. I think I asked this before, but in the other class, by the way, which one of these numbers are you, would an auditor feel were more persuasive, or feel were better numbers? The audit values or the book values?
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah, this is the most important one here, because this is, it's always more persuasive to have evidence that you got yourself. You came up with those numbers, you figure where they are, rather than someone handing you the numbers and saying, here's the numbers. So the audit value is really the one that they usually concentrate on. Okay. Mean per unit. Mean per unit says, okay, we came up with $240 for this, for each one of these. And we think that every one of your items in your entire population, should be the same as ours. So the audit average, $220 times, just that quick, I forgot, 10,000 items.
Isn't it 240?
Yes, you're right. That would have made a difference. Thank you. color code that so I know. So this will be the projected value. Oops, no. All right, so we would have a projected misstatement. Um, 100,000. Okay, understated or overstated?
Overstated.
Yep. Yeah, we said they should be 2,400,000. They have 2,500,000 on the book, so this would be that they have overstated it by 100,000. Okay. Let's come down here. We have ratio. Estimation, and it says that everything is off by the same ratio. In other words, put it in again say a different way, that big items will have big errors, little items have little errors. The size of the item matters. A $50 item is going to have smaller errors than say a $50,000 item. And we times this times the total book value. Oops. And this will equal our projected value. That's $1, by the way. Document camera. All right. So 240 divided by 220. Equals 22,700,000, something, that number. All right. 273. I think. So a misstatement would be okay, so overstated or understated? What do you think? We're saying they should be 2,727,000. They have 2,500,000 on the books.
No, it's understated.
It's understated. Now notice that it is possible for one to give you silly here, but it's possible that one gives you understated, one gives you overstated. And then there's nothing wrong with them, you know. We'll get to later. Well, I talked a little bit about it, but the different methods that we use. But yeah, it is possible you run into this situation. And that's not me. Dog. And I know on the CPA exam they did have a question on there, a real CPA question from years back that they had that situation. And you doubt yourself, you know. I don't know. This one's overstated. This one's understated. Is that right? You know, but yeah, it is. Okay, difference estimation. And so this is a difference estimation one, and this one says that, look, the difference here is $20. And because the difference here is $20, we're saying that they have to add $20 onto each one, right? We're saying that it's $240 for each one. They have an average of $220. So we're saying, look, on average, these are misstated by $20. So for every item, kind of like this one here, it's going to have a misstatement of $20. And so this will be, and this is a little bit strange compared to the other ones, and that this is a projected misstatement. So this one, I just did there. So this one is the this is kind of the weird one that you actually will back into. Okay, so if we're saying they got to add $20 to each one of these, are we saying that it's a $200,000 overstatement or understatement if they have to add $20 to each one? Oh, come on, make a guess. Flip a coin.
Understatement.
It is understated.
Understated.
Yep. Yeah, so when you come down to this thing though, so notice we got to back into the projected value. Yeah. So we're saying that it's misstated by 200,000. This is an understatement. So what would the projected value be? Well, if it's understated by 200,000, so we have to add it onto that, right? So this would have to be 2,700,000. Again, this one's a little bit strange in that you get the misstatement first. And this is the one you got to back into. Any question on that? Okay, I think I'll give you guys 4. So do problems 4 and 5 for homework, but I want to go to the end and do number 6 here real quick. But problems 4 and 5 for homework. Next week. So I see me work through these 4 and 5. These are actually a little bit easier, and that well, I shouldn't say they're easier. They're kind of the same, but you're going to use these numbers. These absolutely were CPA exam questions. The same format's been given before. I want to go to number 6 though, real quick here. Let's see. Okay, I talked about this a little bit, but this is, when do we use which one? And the idea here is, as you notice, depending on what method you use, the projected misstatement can be can be different quite a bit. See, the natural question is, well, when do you use this? Which one do you use? So these are kind of the rules for it. And the mean per unit estimation is useful. It's useful when all of the items have a similar value. And again, this is, and a lot of these can be used for things even outside of auditing. I think I told you guys, like, if you want to know how much, what's, how much do all a flock of ducks have on a pond? You can say, okay, maybe that's a bad idea. but you can take a few ducks, you say, okay, well, we'll take 10 ducks. I know there's 100 ducks out there. We take 10 ducks and we can figure out the total weight of them. And ducks, I don't know what they weigh, but probably pretty similar. They look like they weigh the same. So if they're all of a similar weight, it makes sense. And same thing with dollars. If it's all similar, if you have items that are similar priced, it's not a bad way to do it. And by the way, if you have categories that are similar, let's say you make 3 things and those 3 things are, while the dollar amounts might be different, maybe you make I don't know, a drill press that costs $100 and a saw that costs $200, whatever. You can break up that audit into different categories that are of similar items, and mean per unit's fine if they have a similar value. Ratio estimation. This is it. The statements are occur in a ratio. I should say occur. Sorry for rewriting that. The statements occur in a ratio of the book value. Or another way of saying it is it's the kind of the same thing. It occurs in ratios. In other words, small items have small errors, big items have bigger errors. And it's kind of intuitive. If you had a $50 account, it's probably not going to be off by $5,000. On the other hand, if you have a $200,000 account, it might be off by $5,000. That there's a ratio of the items. And by the way, in my humble opinion, this is probably the most useful one. Now, they're not going to tell you that on the CPA exam. They'll say usually whichever one's appropriate. I should say probably the most universal one. Most situations, it just makes more sense that usually small items, small errors, big items, big errors. And difference estimation is used. Oops. Yeah. Oh. So difference estimation is when things are going to be off by the same amount. So it could be a shipping charge that's not added in correctly, or it could be, you know, that there's a $50 discount that's given, you know, for all sales made in January or something like that. That if it is misstated, that it doesn't matter whether it's a $100 account or a $100,000 account, it probably will be off of that same amount. So this is when things are misstated by the same amount. This is a useful method. And again, if I had to, you know, for us, for the most part, not always, but this is probably the one that fits most of the, you know, most of the things that we test will fit in here. This kind of ratio estimation one. But again, the AICP will not tell you which one is better. They say it depends on what the sample looks like. What are you looking at? What are the most likely misstatements on it? Question on that? Okay, so do pages, two problems 4 and 5. And the first test is due on Friday. Do I have that in here? No. So chapter 1 and 2 exam is due Friday, so get that in, and then give these a shot. No, not that. Problems 4 and 5, and we'll go over them if you have any questions on them. You know, we'll see where you're at. But anyway, see if you can do these, those two, 4 and 5. They're very similar to the other ones that we did.
Professor, can I see the letter C part, please?
Which one?
C, letter C, as in Coke.
Oh, down at the bottom. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Just if you could scroll up. Yeah, there you go.
No, you are a problem.
Let me see. Sorry, it's number 3, letter C. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of a strange one in that you, the mean per unit is overstated, whereas the other ones are understated. You'll notice that the mean per unit one completely ignores the book value. You know, it completely ignores that. If you're doing the mean per unit, you don't have to do this. We don't want your numbers. Your numbers are terrible. But anyway, this yeah. So this method, and that's one of the reasons why it can be different than the other ones, because the other ones take into account the book value. You know, these both take into account the book value, whereas this one doesn't. The mean per unit.